პატივსემულო ელჩებო, ხალბატონებო და ბატონებო, მოგესალმებით საქართველოს პოლიტიკის ინსტიტუტის სახელით და ძალიან მიხარია, რომ დღეს შევიკრიბეთ ამ მნიშვნელოვანი პანელისთვის. თქვენ როგორც იცით, ჩვენი კონფერენცია უკვე მეხუთე წელიწადია ტარდება ნედის მხარდაჭერით და მან ასე ვთქვათ მოიპოვა თავისი ნიშა თქვათ საქართველოში ამ დემოკრატიზაციის თქვათ საკითხების გაშუქების კუთხით. წელს ამ კონფერენცია როგორც იცით იგეგმებოდა ჩვეულებრივ ტრადიციულ ასე ვთქვათ ფორმატში ჩატარება, მაგრამ COVID-19-თან დაკავშირებული მოვლენების გამო ჩვენც ისევე როგორც ბევრი სხვა ორგანიზაცია იძულებული გახდა ასე ვთქვათ შეგვემუშავებინა ალტერნატიული ფორმატი და თქვათ ეს კონფერენცია ჩაგვეტარებინა ვებინარის თქვათ ფორმატში. დღეს ამ კონფერენციის ასე ვთქვათ მეორე პანელი არის, ანუ ჩვენ სამ პანელად გავყავით ის და ძირითადი ასე ვთქვათ თემა დღეს იქნება საერთაშორისო აქტორების როლი საქართველოს დემოკრატიზაციის პროცესში. ეს საკითხი ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანია, მით უმეტეს იმ ფონზე, რომ გუშინ წინ საქართველოს პარლამენტმა მიიღო საკონსტიტუციო ცვლილებები, რომელიც არის მნიშვნელოვანი, თქვათ, წინგადადგმული ნაბიჯი საქართველოში დემოკრატიის კონსოლიდაციისთვის და იმედია, რომ რა თქმა უნდა, რომ ეს ასე ვთქვათ ერთი ნაბიჯია, მაგრამ ჯერ კიდევ ბევრი არის გასაკეთებელი იმ თვალსაზრისით, რომ ეს არჩევნები იყოს სამაგალითო და ეს იყოს ასე ვთქვათ რაღაცნაირად საქართველოსთვის წინგადადგმული ნაბიჯი. ბუნებრივია, რომ ჩვენი ერთ-ერთი დღევანდელი თემა სწორედ ამ თემას ამ საკითხთანაც არის დაკავშირებული. ალბათ ყველას გვახსოვს, რომ ბოლო 30 წლის განმავლობაში თუ რაოდენობით დიდი როლი ითამაშა საერთაშორისო აქტორებმა და კონკრეტულად ევროკავშირმა, შეერთებულმა შტატებმა და სხვა სახელმწიფოებმა ქართული დემოკრატიის განმტკიცების თვალსაზრისით. ასევე ისინი მნიშვნელოვან როლს ასრულებდნენ და ბოლო ხანებშიც კიდევ გამოჩნდა როგორც შუამავალი ხშირად თქვათ სხვადასხვა თქვათ პოლიტიკურ ძალებს შორის. სამწუხაროდ უნდა ითქვას, რომ საქართველოს მიუხედავად გარკვეული წარმატებებისა, რომელსაც ჩვენ მივაღწიეთ ბოლო 30 წლის განმავლობაში, ჯერჯერობით
the achievements that we made in the course of last 3 decades, they're not yet solid, they're not yet stable and sitting solid in Georgia, so they need some enhancement, enforcement, and we need to move forward. We need to also have the support, continue to have support of international actors who are supporting Georgia's democratic development, and that is why it is so important to listen to all of you. You are the representatives of those states, the partner countries that play tremendous and such an important role in Georgia's future democratization. So this is very briefly. On my behalf, and now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Stefan Meister, and I wish you a very successful and interesting discussion.
Thank you, Corneli. A warm welcome also from my side to this second panel discussion of GIP's Annual Foreign Policy Conference. My name is Stefan Meister. I'm head of the South Caucasus office of Heinrich Boell Foundation, which is the green political foundation in Germany. I have a strong background in think tanks, advising the German government on the region. Also, we are now here, so I'm very excited about this foreign policy panel with these high quality speakers we have here. Also, just a couple of introductory words from my side. The international community has played, as also Corneli said, an important role in Georgia's democratization process over the last 2 decades. International partners just played an important role for the compromise of the election law for this year parliamentary election, which went through the final reading in the parliament on Monday. International partners of Georgia will play an important role to guarantee and monitor free and fair elections in autumn this year. There is a strong support for relations with the EU, NATO, and the US in the Georgian society. At the same time, there is increasingly a debate on how much international influence should be on the national politics in this country. Coming from a country who just today took over the EU presidency in times with the pandemic we are all struggling with, we also have to discuss how current trends affect the relations of Georgia with its Western partners. This refers to the growing rift in the transatlantic relations, Brexit, and one of the biggest crises the EU had in its history. All these developments impacts on Georgia's stability and also the stability in the South Caucasus, Georgia's orientation and relations with its Western partners. This panel will explore the international dimension of Georgia's democratization, and this will be focused on a Western view. So we have here Western representatives, and we should not forget there are also other players in the region who try to impact on Georgia's development, like Turkey, like Russia, and also China. So I think we should also have this in mind. We have here 4 distinguished speakers, which have a maximum 10 minutes to answer the following questions. You had also in the invitation, I just shortly read these questions again. The first question is, what is the role of the international community in Georgia's democratization process? The second question is, how and to what extent will the recent turn in EU's foreign and neighborhood policy influence its policy towards Georgia? Third, to what extent and in what ways can and should also the EU, the US, and other international actors influence the election process in Georgia? And finally, what is the role of international watchdogs and non-state actors in Georgia's election process? I just want to shortly introduce you the speakers. The first speaker will be Ambassador Celi Degnan, who is the ambassador of the United States to Georgia since the end of January 2020. She most recently served as the political advisor to the commander of the United States Naval Forces Europe and United States Naval Forces Africa. Previously, she has experiences in embassies in Italy, Kosovo, and Turkey, and was working for the US mission to NATO. So she's a very experienced US diplomat, a long-serving US diplomat, I think, which is really a special value in these times. Secondly, we have the ambassador of the UK, Justin McKenzie Smith, who is since August 2016 ambassador to Georgia. So he's quite experienced here also in the country. He previously was deputy head of mission and director for trade and investment at the British Embassy in Mexico City. But he has a lot of experiences in the post-Soviet region. He was deputy director responsible for UK's relations with Russia, the South Caucasus, and Central Asia in the Foreign Office for 3 years, and also served in the 1990s in Moscow, in the British Embassy in Moscow, and was in between spokesperson for the UK mission to the United Nations. Viola van Cramon will join us a couple of minutes later. She just was busy with other things, but she will definitely join us. She's member of the Green Party, of the German Green Party, since 2001, and has been to the Bundestag between 2009 and 2013. She's a very experienced person on Ukraine and also on the South Caucasus. She was deputy chairwoman for the German-Ukrainian Parliamentary Friendship Group and also the Friendship Group with the South Caucasus in the Bundestag, and is member of the European Parliament since 2019. And here she's in the Committee on Foreign Affairs and also rapporteur on relations to the Western Balkans. We hope she will join soon. And finally, we have Cristian Urse, who's head of the Council of Europe office in Georgia. Also very experienced person since quite a while, also already here in the region. And I think it's also very important to have not only national embassies and have also the European Parliament, but also have here the Council of Europe, I think, which plays an important role on human rights, but also on elections, for instance, and all these key dimensions. So I would give first Ambassador Degnan the word, and would like to ask you to speak slow, also for the translator, and to the auditorium. I would really appreciate if you can already ask questions during the speeches, which we will collect and then later ask in a further round to the speakers. So the floor is yours,
Thank you.
Ambassador.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me join this panel today. Very interesting and timely topic, as you mentioned, Herr Meister, and I think it'll be interesting to hear the comments of my colleagues and the questions from the audience as well. Obviously, the United States is deeply committed to helping Georgia achieve its democratic, its goal of having a strong democracy. We believe that a strong democracy is what stimulates economic development and prosperity and brings stability to any country. And of course, that's particularly important to a country in a region like this. Obviously, the level of the U.S. engagement and the level of our assistance to Georgia reflects the not just our common values and our shared interests here, but also it reflects Georgia's commitment to progress, its willingness to do the hard work that's required. And I think that that is one reason why so many international partners want to see Georgia succeed. This will be a particularly important year. As you mentioned, the October elections will be a milestone for Georgia's democratic development in many ways, and we are very pleased that the constitutional amendments were passed on Monday, most notably because it was the result of the political parties coming together, negotiating, making very difficult compromises, and agreeing amongst themselves on what kind of an electoral system Georgia would have this election and prepare for the future, as well as underscoring a very important commitment to the importance of an independent judiciary and to avoiding political interference in the judiciary. To the topic in particular here, and I would add as well, we're hoping to see the electoral reform legislation passed this week that fully incorporates the ODIHR recommendations. That will be another important piece of ensuring free and fair elections this October and into the future for Georgia. On the particular question here, I would say that the United States, as a very proud partner of Georgia's over the years, has played 4 primary roles in terms of trying to influence and support the development. As a development partner, as a security partner, as a neutral arbiter and advocate at times, and as an honest broker and mediator at other times. These are certainly not roles unique to the United States. Other international actors play similar roles, and I would include in that also NGOs, sometimes the media, civil society. So in our own ways, we sometimes try to assist in that way. But melded together, these reflect in general, the way the Georgian-American partnership has developed over the years. So looking at the first one, a principal role, obviously, for the United States and other actors as well, is as a development partner to Georgia's democratization. The U.S. approach to working with Georgia is to emphasize what Georgia has identified as its priorities, to help Georgia define priorities and the strategies, develop the strategies to achieve the goals that it has identified. And then to try and implement those with the various stakeholders and build an understanding of where Georgia is going and why. In fact, I just, before coming here, was at a formal launch of USAID's $7 million basic education program with the Ministry of Education that is designed to complement the reforms that the ministry is implementing. So in various areas, rule of law, civil society, building political parties, and helping to with voter education in the political process, the United States is always looking to see how we can support and complement the work that the Georgians themselves are already doing. We're trying to fill gaps, build capabilities at different points in Georgia's history in the last 30 years. It has needed a different balance of that. So we are always trying to calibrate our assistance in a way that further strengthens and is appropriate for where Georgia is in its development. The United States is the largest single country development donor to Georgia, and over the various years, we've contributed over $4 billion in development assistance in a variety of ways: health, rule of law, as certainly in democracy and governance. So it's with some real sense of pride and satisfaction when we see Georgia moving forward with something like the constitutional amendments, and I hope good elections this October. I will certainly be out at the visiting the polling stations on election day, as I'm sure my colleagues will be as well. On the as a security partner, obviously that's been an important part of our partnership with Georgia, in part because we feel that having good security and a stable home front in a way is the prerequisite to allowing the other aspects, whether it's economic development or in some cases democratic development, flourish. People have to be feel safe and secure before they're going to be able to start thinking about building their institutions and making those kinds of fundamental changes. So we are very pleased to see the progress that Georgia has made in its own capability to defend its borders, to deter aggression, and to contribute to international security, not just its own. And this is, again, a result of Georgia's commitment to put in the hard work, to make the investments, to build its own institutions. We want to help where we can, but always in partnership with them. A third role that sometimes the United States and other international actors play is can be as a neutral arbiter or an advocate for the growth of Georgia's democracy. Sometimes for Georgia itself on the international stage, as a friend of Georgia's. Clearly, building democracy can be very messy, it can be confusing to the public, and sometimes it's helpful for an outsider, an international actor, to support the government efforts to explain what the changes that are coming, to work with civil society and the media to help them educate the public about why these changes are really in the long term going to be better for them, to allow their voices to be better heard in the electoral process. We also have a responsibility sometimes to our own taxpayers to be sure that we can be accountable to the U.S. taxpayers for why we are investing so much in Georgia's future. And so that role as neutral arbiter to help to weigh in with recommendations and suggestions about how Georgia can best use its resources is an important component for our own taxpayers. We can help sometimes play the role of an objective assessment of the progress that Georgia's making in different areas. And I say that as the United States, but certainly all international actors can play that role and do play that role, including some NGOs that I think provide very useful feedback. It's not always welcomed, but if governments are receptive, that is the kind of feedback they need to really improve their strategies and make meaningful progress for their voters. The fourth role that we sometimes play is, we try to play as honest broker and mediator. And I think we've seen a period of deep polarization that happens in a democracy sometimes, especially one that's building its institutions now. There can be a real shortage of trust among parties, and sometimes even between voters and the public and their political representatives. So sometimes that is a role that an outsider, the United States or other international actors, can play to help connect the public and their political representatives or their government. There's much more, and I look forward to hearing other people's comments. I will just conclude by saying that The United States, again, is very proud to partner with Georgia as it's been going through its democratic evolution in the last few decades, and always looking to play a complementary role to what Georgia is doing, whether as a development partner, a security partner, a neutral arbiter or advocate, or as an honest broker and a mediator. So we are only effective in these roles if we have Georgia's support and sort of coordination with the Georgians, and of course Georgia's ownership and its investment and partnership is absolutely key to the success of any of the work that we're doing here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this introductory speech. I also want to welcome Viola von Cramon, who just joined during this speech. I already introduced you, so you will, after the UK ambassador, have the opportunity also to join this discussion. And Ambassador Degnan, maybe just a short follow-up question to what you have presented. We observe a change in the priorities of US policy and also withdraw from several regions. Do you think that this can also have an impact on US engagement in the South Caucasus and in particular on Georgia?
The US is always going to be focused on strategic areas, and this region is certainly a geostrategically important, and I think it always will be. It's important to the United States also because we want to see Georgia succeed. It is made so much progress in the last 30 years. I think it's an inspiration and certainly a model for other countries in the region. And for that, we have a deep commitment to Georgia's success. So I don't expect there will be great changes. We're watching very closely Georgia's commitment to its democratic development. And that is going to be, I think, best on display in October with the elections.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. So I just want to hand over to the UK ambassador. I want to hand over to you, Justin McKenzie Smith. Ambassador, maybe you would just take over. Is technically everything fine for you? Okay, then please join the discussion.
Everything under control. Everything under control. Thank you. Well, ძალიან დიდი მადლობა და ყველას მოგესალმებით.
So good afternoon, everyone.
მადლობა მოსვევისთვის და
thanks for inviting me. And I'm very happy to be here on this very important webinar. Now I will move to English.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Corneli, for inviting me to join this panel. Your timing couldn't be better. It's clearly an issue of real relevance at this moment in time. If I was going to take issue with the panel at all, the title I have is International Actors and Elections. I'd make one simple edit. I would reverse those two factors. I would talk about elections and international actors. And it's symbolic, but it's kind of the same point I think that my colleague Kelly was making, that the key thing here is about the process itself, the process of elections themselves, and what a country is doing itself is the most important thing. For the international community, it's about finding ways to support that. But the process always, always, always comes first. I want to just say a few words by way of introduction, and I'll group them under sort of three headings. One is about the role of the international community, just elaborating a little on what I've just said. Secondly, a few words on process, and Kelly has covered that very thoroughly already, which is great. And then thirdly, just to expand a little bit beyond elections into the issue of democratization itself and the fundamentals of democratization. But firstly on role, the role of the international community. And as I say, for me, I look at it from the other direction. You know, what is the process that the international community can help to support? One of the advantages of lockdown over recent weeks and months is that I've had a little bit more time to do some reading about Georgian history, among other things. And you know, I look back at the first democratic election in Georgia in February 1919, which was an absolutely extraordinary process. It resulted, amongst other things, in the election of 5 women parliamentarians, which is a wonderful precedent. But it was a process that was driven by Georgia and by Georgians. The international community played a role in that case later, after the elections, in terms of working towards recognition of the Georgian state, but it was a Georgian-led process. And then in more recent history, when you look at the series of elections that have been since the restoration of independence in 1991, particularly since the November 2003 elections, the changes, the distance, the democratic distance that Georgia and the Georgian people have traveled in that time is really extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. And the international community has played a role, definitely. But that has been a supporting role. That's been a supporting role. And the changes that have been brought about, the strengthening of that democratic system has been in Georgian hands. And it's the same today. And I think that's very important. Monday's constitutional changes, I describe them as historic, and I know other people use that word as well, and I genuinely believe they are historic changes. My congratulations are first and foremost to the Georgian people who pressed for, insisted on those changes. I take my hat off to the facilitators, and we are very lucky to have 2 of them on the panel with us this afternoon. But I don't think I am causing any offense if I say that their role has been to support the discussions and search for consensus among the parties themselves. So I think it's really, really important. It may sound a little bit obvious, but I think it's really important at all times that we remember what the distinct roles of political actors and international actors are. And if I was being a little bit provocative, I think I would say that I look forward to the day in Georgia when the role of the international community is even less significant, to be honest. That's about the role. Process. As I say, Keli has done a great job in introducing that. Like the United States, the United Kingdom strongly supports the next steps to fully implement the OSCE ODIHR recommendations, and as well as a lot of the excellent practice set out by the Council of Europe. And those aren't instructions. With elections, the old saying that practice makes perfect doesn't apply. In the United Kingdom, we had our first general election in 1708. That's over 300 years ago now. Our most recent election, general election, was in December 2019. Following that election, there are a list of something like 25 to 30 compelling recommendations from our own electoral commission about how we can improve our electoral process. So, elections and the process of democratization continues and goes on. And, I strongly encourage all Georgian parties to approach it in that spirit as well. Observers, the UK, along with others, again, will play our full part in the international observer contingent, alongside the important domestic observer contingent that there is in the Georgian electoral system. I think it's very important that we see full engagement of Georgia's very active civil society in this electoral process, as well as media as well. And then I think the last area of process that I would mention is, and it's wonderful to have Madame von Cramon on the line, but I think it's really important to do what we can to support these inter-parliamentary links as well. I think in my experience, much of the most effective engagement that I have seen in terms of sharing experience and building capacity has been between parliamentarians. And that's something that I know British parliamentarians very much support. So that is role and process. I said the third and final thing I wanted to talk about was to go a little bit beyond elections to the process of democratization itself. Because again, apologies if this is a statement of the obvious, but I think it's important to remember that elections are about much more than what happens on polling day itself, or even indeed during the election campaign. Elections depend on the democratic foundations that are in place. There's a wonderful Georgian word, sapudzveli, the democratic sapudzveli that exist in a society. And that's another area where I think the international community has a role to play, in support of Georgia's own choices, the Georgian people's own choices, and in support of Georgian reforms. There are lots of areas that we could mention here, and I will just mention three quickly. One is very much on my mind, and that is the importance that our democratic systems, whether in the UK, Georgia, or wherever, are as representative as they can be, and that includes the widest possible representation of women in our democratic systems and in our electoral processes as well. My last visit to the Georgian Parliament was way back on the 4th of March, before the lockdown began, and I've said to a few others that while it was an important occasion, the President's annual address to Parliament, I did have a slightly sinking feeling when I looked over the balcony to the floor of the Parliament, and I saw very, very, very few women participating in that important hearing. It's 14% of parliamentarians at the moment at the national level are women, and I think that's a challenge to Georgia's political leadership to reverse that process and to do everything possible to take advantage of this coming election to restore and enhance the presence of women in the Georgian Parliament at the national level as well as the regional level. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the 1919 election sets a very, very powerful example for that. And the UK is very pleased to be supporting that with partners such as NDI and members of the Georgian Parliament as well. The second area of sapudzveli, of fundamentals, I want to talk about briefly is public administration reform. During the COVID crisis, I think that the crucial importance to our democracies of independent, meritocratic, efficient civil services has been highlighted, powerfully highlighted. And I think in Georgia's case, that is the backbone of Georgia's democracy. People will only vote or will only have faith in elections if they believe that governments, the elected governments, will bring about change. And governments can only bring about change if they have the levers, the tools to deliver that change. And that means civil service reform. So we are strongly committed to working with all parts of Georgian society to put in place evidence-based, results-oriented policy making, and a civil service that is a civil service that the Georgian people deserve and which is open to civil society in its decision making. Final area is media. I think we'll talk about this some more in the course of the panel, But I believe that the international community also has a role here in the midst of the media and information revolution that we are going through at the moment, in helping to make sure that for all that noise and all that chaos, there are still independent and objective voices available to the electorate, to society, even when that goes against all the logic of commerce and economics and financial support for media systems. I think it is absolutely crucial that our democracies have, perhaps more crucial than ever, access to independent, verifiable and objective sources of information. That's what I want to say about the role of the international community, the process that we can be involved in, and some of the fundamentals that we are pleased to be supporting. And just as a postscript, I'll use this as an opportunity to partly respond to Stefan's introductory words mentioning Brexit. Just to say, I hope that what I've said this afternoon, and indeed I hope if people are aware of what the British Embassy is working on at the moment, I hope that people have no concerns at all about the UK's commitment to remaining fully engaged and strongly supportive of the Georgian people's European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations. And I will be moving on from Georgia in a few weeks' time, in fact. But one of the things that I am most proud of in my 4 years here is the negotiation and conclusion and signature of a fundamental new UK-Georgian bilateral agreement, which will be the framework for our bilateral relations in political relations, security, trade, educational links across the board for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a role for the international community, of course. It needs to be carefully defined, evaluated, and always in support of Georgian-led processes. For me, Georgian democracy is like a vine. It can seem fragile at times, but in reality, it is very, very robust and has very deep roots. It needs looking after, it needs tending. And as I move on from Georgia, I am very optimistic that I see a younger generation, a young group of young people in society who are passionately committed to protecting the vine of Georgian democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you really made some very crucial points also, which shows also some years of experiences in Georgia. Just a short follow-up question also to you before I hand over to Viola von Cramon. You already mentioned this, and I think this is for me the crucial problem. We have a very polarized and personalized political culture in this country. And the problem is that many decisions are made outside of the institutions. Yeah, and many negotiations are outside of not in the parliament, but outside of the parliament. Yeah, and I think also the last decision was part of this exercise somehow. How to bring this into the institutions? So how to strengthen the institutions? I think this is something also with the EU is struggling in many countries. Yeah. Do you have any, I don't know, any suggestion or any experience of this? I would like to ask you this question: how to bring it into the institution and strengthen institutions in Georgia?
Well, I think there's potentially a very long answer to that, Stefan. I mean, and lots of different parts to it. But for me, it is about demonstrating that the decisions that matter can be taken in Parliament. That's the point I think that we all want to get to, and you know, make no mistake, this is continues to be a live debate in the UK. You know, over recent decades, when governments have sought to distance themselves from Parliament and when they have been more engaged. But for me, and maybe this is a personal view, I think much of what I've talked about this afternoon, much of the effort that the British Embassy is engaged in is about trying to demonstrate that on the issues that fundamentally matter to the progress of Georgian democracy, those can and should be taken in the Georgian Parliament. And by demonstrating that, you build up confidence, you build up levels of engagement, and it becomes a sort of self-sustaining process. And so it's a very generic answer, but as I say, I think the question you ask demands a much more detailed response, which may come out in the course of this discussion. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So I hand over to Viola from Cramon, from the Green Party in the European Parliament, and also very much engaged in Georgia, and yeah, also in the latest discussion. So please, Viola, the floor is yours.
I would like to start. I think for me personally, but also for me as a parliamentarian, being an international actor, being an international observer, it is of utmost importance to see Georgia as a state and not just as a, let's say, figure on the chess field in the geostrategic environment. I will never forget when I started becoming many of my colleagues saw Georgia or the entire region more as an influence sphere of Russia, and that's why we have to tackle them, and that's why we have to address our messages very carefully, because otherwise it can be misused by Russia and by others. So it was never about Georgia, it was always about the location Georgia is, or the neighborhood Georgia is located in. And so I felt really pity for this state, which is great, and we really should strive for the Georgians and for, let's say, the interest of the Georgians to be ambitious and to strive for reforms and so on, and less for the, let's say, geostrategic approach, which is of course important, but it's not everything. And I felt sometimes a little bit, let's say, superficial when talking about the region, rather for, let's say, the core domestic reforms, where everyone, or what everyone was now referring to, but seeing Georgia as one important player against Russia, or one important player in their own interest in the region. And this has changed. I see there's a shift of an international engagement in Georgia, which is significant differently from what we have seen, I would say, 10, 15 years ago, for sure. Whether this is only good or whether this is just a shift, we can debate maybe later on. But for sure, I see that now, I would even call it the historic agreement of 8th of March is a significant milestone in different matters, but definitely also in terms of finding a compromise within a complete polarized political class. I mean, I came to Georgia in 2010, and then again and again, almost every year, at least once. I've been twice or 3 times as an election observer. And now I'm the lead member for the DEC. DEC means Democracy and Election Support Group in the European Parliament, where we mainly try then bringing together the parliamentary groups, the fraction, the the members of the parliament and really find a civilized and structured dialogue to overcome this very deep gaps within the political sphere or within the political circus. And I really see this as a true and is a very crucial issues for us in the European Parliament to work on this. But what I've heard from the past, from the members, but also from the staff of the Georgian Parliament, that they were always up and always ready to cooperate with us. So we have, let's say, the comparison with other parliaments in the region, and I have heard from the administration in the European Parliament that Georgia was always the trendsetter. They were always ahead of everyone. They were always the best interested. They were always the best organized in terms of, yes, we have staff being ready to travel to Brussels, listening, picking up our issues. So in terms of readiness and really willingness to cooperate with our, proposals, with our administration, and also, of course, with our MEPs. What I've heard, Georgia was always the best in the group compared to many other parliaments. So that at least pays off. There is a vibrant interest, and that shows also that actually the association agreement and with this, the parliamentary cooperation is really a good instrument for the colleagues in Tbilisi, for sure. Yep. So, and especially I think it was also important, maybe a little bit from the past, to refer to when I've been to Ukraine in the 2010, 11, 12, and so on, and we could really also work with the role model of Georgian reform agenda. And when you referred to the public service or civil service reform, but I think the patrol police was unique in the region. Apart from the Baltic state, I think the former Soviet states have never proved a real reform within their security service. There was just Georgia and this patrol police. And so in Ukraine, for example, when I've been there, especially in the east of Ukraine, I was always referring to, yes, reforms are possible. The fight against corruption in the police is possible. Please have a look, and please invite some colleagues from Georgia. And it was interesting then listening to the Ukrainians saying, well, this is different. No, I mean, we are not that good. We are not that far. So I was really proud of taking Georgia as a role model, and so seeing Ukraine in the situation that they're not even able to wanted to take this into account, that the Soviet, a post-Soviet state would be able to take over this reform agenda. So I would see us as not just facilitators within Georgia, but also amongst best practice or between two states, and really taking the reforms from Georgia which were implemented and which worked well and were successful, and taking them into Moldova and also Ukraine and bringing their people together. We do this in the, of course, Eastern Partnership group, but what I've heard from Ukraine, they would like to have more of this, since some of the countries are less advanced and some are more advanced. I think it could be crucial also to work. I mean, we are against this trio strategy as Greens, but nevertheless, there is an advantage if you take one of some of the advantages and some of the working reforms out and bringing them into the next country or the other country. And this is what I surely see which worked well. Yes, you have referred to the very let's say small proportion of women working in politics in Georgia. this is surely right, but this is also not a unique situation in the South Caucasus. I mean, looking at some of our Western parliaments, and we are also not doing better, but we are doing steps back, unfortunately. But nevertheless, of course, we have had many different pure women MP groups here in the European Parliament, and they are more effective, they're more to the point, they're better prepared, they're better motivated to really work on subjects. And I much more prefer to work on feminist foreign policy than on overall work, foreign policy. So this is something I would absolutely stress and emphasize. If we could put this in our, let's say, mainstreaming agenda, how do we do foreign policy? I would very much in favor of this for sure. I see that the last parliament, the last decisions in the parliament on the draft law was also crucial, and I really congratulated Georgia for this. I think it was a pity that not all of the opposition parties then finally could make it possible for them to vote on this agreement. This is a bit of a missing chance. We also talked to some of the decision makers during the last period, and we also recommended you can measure, let's say, the level of matureness or the level of democracy, how much room and how much potential you give to your opposition. And in that case, I think it was a good compromise, and I think it was really a shame, and it was really sad, and that the opposition didn't take this opportunity to vote on a well-negotiated compromise, and they could also go out for the election and lobby on their achievements. So I think that was a little bit of a shame. Maybe my last point would be, you see,
would be
as
good
I
to come
mentioned,
slowly to the end, yeah.
Yes, my last point
Sorry.
would just be, would just be, as I said, you have a very engaged, let's say, political sphere and political actors, but that also means they really try to instrumentalize you, and they try to let you speak on behalf of them, and try to put you out of context. This is sometimes a bit annoying, actually. I mean, they need ownership for their ideas, and this is what I've told all my colleagues in the parliament. I'm not working on behalf of you. I mean, this might be your ideas, and you have to fight for them, and you have to sell them to your constituency. It won't be up to me. So in the end, of course, we can give recommendations and we can make comments, but in the end, the ownership is up to the politicians in the Georgian parliament, and I think that some of them have surely understood this.
Thank you very much. I think this was also a very important statement. I skipped my follow-up question. I'm looking to the time, and also want to keep some time for the auditorium, which I would like to also to motivate to ask more questions in the Q&A, and we will pick up after the next speech by Cristian Urse, who represents the Council of Europe here in Georgia. So please, Cristian, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. Stefan, Dr. Kakachia. Let me greet the other panelists. It's a real pleasure for me as well to be with you today and to share a couple of thoughts in regard of the electoral environment and processes and the upcoming elections. A lot has been said, and there is always a disadvantage, I believe, to speak at the end of a panel. I will do my best to avoid repeating things, and maybe to try to structure the message I want to convey around three main topics in an attempt to respond to the questions that were put forward, the role of the international community in Georgia's democratization national actors in the election processes. Let me start with the first topic, which is the particularity of my organization, the Council of Europe, because references have been made to the EU, to NATO, to the main bilateral partners of Georgia. The Council of Europe has this specificity that is an organization to which Georgia is a member. And so is the UK, if I am to joke a bit about Brexit, although that's not a topic for joking. And so from this point of view, all our involvement, engagement, and efforts to support the Georgian authorities in any endeavor, in this particular case, in improving the electoral framework and the electoral processes, is made together with Georgia. It's certainly not from the outside. Georgia, on one hand, participates within the Council of Europe, which is, in the meantime, a community of shared values, of course. Georgia participates in setting standards, be them standards on, starting with the main conventions of the Council of Europe and arriving to electoral standards. Georgia is there. By the way, and just to give an example at hand, Georgia has been presiding over the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe from last November to May 2020. And one of Georgia's priorities put forward was the connection between human rights and environmental protection. That is, I can say, already a legacy of Georgia. It's a topic that has been very well received by the member states, by the public at large. There's been a successful conference on that, albeit it's taking place online. But it was accepted as a very relevant topic, and as an example, I can tell you that an initiative which is called the World Forum of Democracy of the Council of Europe, which takes place every year in November, the edition of this year already has as its main topic precisely this: human rights and environment. So Georgia's contribution already produces follow-ups within the organization, and so is the case with electoral standards. So from that point of view, as I said, Georgia is there to discuss, to contribute to standards. The Georgian parliamentarians take part in electoral monitoring missions in other countries as per the rules of our parliamentary assembly, and so Georgia is an equal actor in that regard. And with that, I'm going a bit to the second point I wanted to touch upon, and also I think it complements a bit Justin's historical perspective, because he started to refer to the elections in 1919, which were a landmark evolution, clearly in recent history of Georgia. I think it's important, and certainly it is important for us to remember when we want to assess Georgia's last 25 or 30 years developments in the precise field of elections, or more general in terms of democratization, where did Georgia start and where is Georgia today? And for that, I will take the liberty to quote from a document which is a recommendation from 1994 of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Back then, the Parliamentary Assembly, which is the advisory body, by the way, one of the statutory bodies and the advisory body of the Council of Europe, back then was discussing the issue of enlargement, and in 1994, already the countries of Central Europe would have joined, and the countries of Western Balkans and former Soviet Union were not yet part of the Council of Europe. Now, the Parliamentary Assembly back then, dwelling upon the idea that Europe does not have a clearly defined eastern boundary, so to say, tried to answer to the question, who is eligible to apply to become. Actually, I think you'd be surprised to hear that apart from the Balkan countries, there were a number of countries already enjoying special guest status with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, among them Belarus, Moldova, Republic of Moldova, Russia, and Ukraine. And when it comes to the Southern Caucasus, the Assembly back in 1994 said, in view of their cultural links with Europe, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia would have the possibility of applying for membership, provided they clearly indicate their will to be considered as part of Europe. And I would say, I mean, that was the thinking 25 years ago. And where are we today when we compare Georgia with any of the countries that I've quoted, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Moldova, Ukraine, and Russia, in terms of democratization and in terms of elections. And with that, I think we can see, and there are moments in the recent history, but we can see decisive progress in Georgia's evolution. There was certainly the moment of 2003, already mentioned here, and then the subsequent elections in 2004, presidential and parliamentary elections, which changed the electoral landscape and clearly were considered by the international partners as a step forward. There was certainly already the moment of 2012, which is the first time when power changed hands peacefully in Georgia. And again, that was, I think, an achievement which was praised in particular on all political actors of Georgia at the time. I think there are moments when we can capitalize on a clear and I would say stable and consistent progress. And with that, I believe we arrive to the moments of today. And again, when it comes to the decision finalized on Monday by the Parliament, I can refer a little bit to the Council of Europe's role in the past years. Again, the idea to move to a proportional electoral system in Georgia has been there for a while. I looked back into our documents. Our Parliamentary Assembly has the recommendation of that kind back in 2008, an explicit text. So you can see that it's been a long and difficult process. But it did, the Assembly did so, I think, with some clear ideas and conclusions in mind, because after all, you have various electoral systems in Europe, and no one can claim that one is better than another. But nevertheless, I think that it was an almost consensus here in Georgia and among the international partners that for the specific political setting of Georgia, and in order to encourage and stimulate political pluralism, a proportional system is more suitable. And that has been set in the constitution in the new constitution of 2017. And it's been made also possible for this year. This was the big question starting from last November and up until last Monday, whether a new, more proportional, as they said, electoral system would be achieved for 2020. And it was achieved. And with this, I want to say a word about the process itself, the discussion, the negotiations, the process to which I had the opportunity to be a part, and I fully subscribe to what Justin said earlier. We were mere facilitators of an engagement and of a dynamics among the Georgian political actors. I would say here we shouldn't fall with the decision and with the vote on Monday. We shouldn't fall in the trap of seeing ourselves everything through the lenses of this polarized dialogue and polarized political life in Georgia. This is a reality, it's true. And in an ideal world, we would have seen all the political parties voting on Monday in the final hearing. The fact that it wasn't so, and the fact that this discussion will continue well into the electoral campaign, unfortunately, the fact that it wasn't so doesn't discount the sincere, from my point of view, involvement and the real work of the political actors into this dialogue. And I would say here, we had not only the parliamentary opposition there, we had extra parliamentary parties and political figures represented into this political dialogue. I honestly believe they made a very important input in the discussions, and they also contributed to this publicity of the topic and to catalyzing the popular support towards this outcome, which now is embraced by everyone in the society, and that is to be credited to all political actors in Georgia, and we should continue building on that, because there were moments when they truly cooperate and they negotiated, they made compromises, and those were difficult compromises from various angles and points of view. But the outcome was there. The outcome was achieved, albeit not with the full vote in Parliament. And then I think the next step is to continue to stay engaged and to make sure that the political climate leading up to the elections is as clean as possible. It ensures a level playing field, and it ensures fair and transparent elections, whose outcome will be, in the end, certainly more pluralistic than they have been in the past. I could say more, but I think it's better to save space for the questions and to react to that. So I'll stop here.
I'm already waiting, even if I think it was really important, your contribution also to show that there is compromise possible in this country, yeah, and I think this is also very crucial, that there is an ongoing negotiation with the involvement of international actors, but also among the political actors we have in the country. I just hand over to Givi Silagazze from GIP to ask several questions to the panel, and then you all have the opportunity to respond. I think we will only have one round, so let's take several questions, and please, you don't need to answer every question. Yeah, some of the questions are only refer to one speaker, and I would prefer to that you answer all the questions, but not everybody answers all the questions. So this is just my question to you. So Givi, maybe you take over, and please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear speakers. Thank you, Dr. Meister. So we have several questions. First question is to Ambassador Keli Degnan and MEP Viola from Cramon. This question is about the Russian interference in the 2020 elections. So how likely it is, and what could you say? Has Russia already taken steps towards that direction? And also in this context, could you also say a few words on the importance of cybersecurity during the elections? Another question, it is a general question. We have seen a number of elections taking place in the wake of COVID-19. We are not only have the elections themselves been compromised by health concerns, but international organizations have been unable to deploy the observation missions they had planned. So the question goes, do the panelists have any concerns that the upcoming elections and the observations mission planned for them will be affected by health concerns? Next question, since the amendments to the constitution are already adopted, what are the most important conditions Georgian authorities should fulfill to ensure free, fair and transparent parliamentary elections? Could you please name 3 of them? Another question regarding the standards of the upcoming elections. Sometimes the diplomatic corpus needs to convince the losing side to accept defeat. Flaws prior to and during the ballot box time are accepted to a certain extent. So in recent years, the author of this question says Georgian elections have not been under threat of being dismissed despite some flaws. So the question is the following. Should Georgia be held in 2020 to a higher standard of election conduct than, let's say, in 2016 or 2018? And finally, the question regarding the famous March agreement. This question is specifically for Ambassador Degnan and MEP Viola von Cramon. Do you consider the agreement of March 8th has already been fully implemented? And a kind of follow-up general question, what would you comment on the recent developments surrounding the ambassador of Germany? Do you think the exchanges and different interpretations of his comments on Georgi Rua was damaging for Georgia's relations with the West in general? And the last question, specifically for MEP Viola von Cramon, how do you see the opportunity to implement feminist policy in preparatory period to elections in Georgia? Would it be some recommendations issued by European Parliament? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for all these questions. We will not be able to answer all the questions. I think it's now coming more and more in. I would hand over to Ambassador Degnan first to answer the questions which were addressed to you. Please, it's your choice.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start with the first one. I think we've all seen how active and creative Russian disinformation is affecting and interfering with many of our elections, and Georgia is an obvious target there. I know the United States, the UK, other friends of Georgia and development assistance donors here are working with Georgia for some time on helping to get the public a little more able to discern disinformation from accurate information, to hear and read the media and the information they're receiving with greater scrutiny, and be able to evaluate it better. So while I don't have any concrete proof, but I think it would be quite likely that Russia would try to interfere with Georgia's elections here. They are moving toward more fully proportional. That is going to be another big success if Georgia is able to have good elections, and again set Georgia forward as a model, not just for this region, but elsewhere. So I will sum up also on cybersecurity. This is a very important area. Georgia recently had a major attack that was attributed to the Russian state, the GRU. So I think the fact that that is a big wake-up call, not just for Georgia, but others, and there's been a lot of attention that we're all paying to the cyber hygiene of our networks, to make sure that we're as protected as we possibly can be. I would like to just say quickly on the 3 points for what's necessary for free elections. There are many things necessary, but if I had to boil it down, I would say regulations against voter intimidation, regulations against abuse of administrative resources, professionalizing the election commission, and campaign finance regulations so that it's clear where the money is coming from. And these are all good provisions for all of our democracies to incorporate. We have best practices, we have lessons learned in all of our countries, and I think Georgia is working hard to find the best formula for this country. Finally, I would say, obviously, Monday was a good success for one part of the March 8th agreement, and I think the Georgians can be very proud of that. The opposition had principled reason for not participating in the vote, agree with it or not. They felt that they were not able to participate in what they acknowledge is a very important step for Georgia's democracy. The joint statement pertains to avoiding, in the past, now, and in the future, political interference in the judicial process. And I think that is going to be a continuing objective for Georgia's political and judicial processes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador McKenzie, Smith, maybe I give you the next word. Microphone.
Yeah, thank you very much. And there's some excellent questions. I'll be quite selective in what I answer, and I'll be brief. I think the issue of outside interference in the electoral process is as real an issue in Georgia as it is in the UK, US, other European countries as well. This is unfortunately a fact of life at the moment in our democracies, and there is a lot that we must do to be alert for that kind of interference. And Ambassador Degnan has talked about the support and cooperation that is going on between UK, US, Georgian authorities and others in this area. But I would also add that we must recognize the natural defenses that also exist in Georgia and elsewhere. Let's remember that there have been very, very significant elections in Georgia in 2016, 2017, 2018, which I pretty sure have faced attempts at outside interference, but they have been conducted relatively successfully, and they have been assessed to be representative of the views of the electorate. So yes, this is a reality that we all need to work together to face, but let's not underestimate the natural defenses that exist in our societies already. Two final quick answers. Ambassador Degnan gave a very good answer on the three things the Georgian authorities need to do, and I would use that as one of my three, which I would call the OSCE ODIHR recommendations. If I was going to add two more, it would be my point about media and trying in all the pressure of what is going to be a very, very competitive election campaign to protect and preserve and allow some space for independent, objective information to be available to the public, so media. And my third point is to get young people involved as well. In all our societies, we face an issue of disillusionment with the electoral process and the political process, and I think the authorities have a role to play in making these elections relevant and accessible to young people. Final point, if I may, on the feminist policy. I know it wasn't addressed towards me, but I did raise it in my introductory remarks, and I just want to underline that I think the Georgian political parties have an opportunity to take a lead here and make some important steps forward in terms of their selections of party lists and candidates to try and redress the shortfall in women's representation in the Georgian electoral system. And I very much hope they'll do so. I agree that this is an issue that we face together, but this is smart politics as much as anything else. Thank you. Oh, and very, very finally, I feel obliged to express my sort of personal and professional support for the German ambassador and recognize that he, like all of us, is doing his job to the best of his ability. Thank you.
Dr. Meister, can I interrupt just for a minute? I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave. I regret not being able to hear the rest of the responses and questions. I'm very sorry, but I appreciate being included. And if I could leave on one note, that would be to echo what Justin just said regarding Ambassador Urse. Very much agree that it was inappropriate to involve him in that, and I have nothing but respect for the ambassador. Thank you again for letting me participate.
Thank you for joining, and thank you for your contribution. Thank you very much. Viola, I hand over to you to.
Thank you. Yeah, I fully share what both of the ambassadors have said and clarified, and for sure it would be a wonder if I name Russia wouldn't interfere and wouldn't try to meddle into this into the next election. I mean, that's what they normally do everywhere, not just in Georgia. And as Ambassador Justin McKenzie rightly stated, I mean, there's a natural resistance, there's a resilience in Georgia. There's a professional team working on this, and it has a lot to do with media literacy. It has a lot to do with independent, critical media, giving them the space and the potential to disclose this kind of narratives which are coming from Russia, but not only. And this makes it even more interesting to see what kind of different interference we finally face, because of course, let's say 6 years ago, it was very easy. It was just the Kremlin sending these narratives and the other countries have picked them up. But now it's even a little bit more complicated. And that's what makes it also a little bit more sophisticated for us to dismantle them and to understand whose interest is in which narratives. And it's always about destabilizing a country. And of course, we have to be aware of this, and people have to be aware of this. And since it was also mentioned the cybersecurity, yes, cybersecurity is one of the main pillars within the Eastern Partnership for the next period. And we will heavily invest into this, and we will be a strong partner when it comes to cybersecurity, that's for sure, and this was recognized by the European Commission. When it comes to quotas, I mean, the ambassador has absolutely excellently mentioned, it is up to the Georgian party leaders to decide what kind of party they want, what kind of political representatives they want. I mean, one is of course quota on women. I think this is already obligatory for a long time in Georgian politics, so there is no question actually, but diversity even means more. And since we have Armenians, since we have Azeris, and we have other minorities in the country, I would rather like to see more diversity in the parliament than we have currently, but nevertheless, more than 40% women in the parliament would be a big upgrade for sure. And of course, we will heavily focus on this, but we are not the ones who take the decision on who is going to go on which seat on the list. So it is up to you, it is up to the media, it is up to the members of the particular party to make their mind up what kind of representatives they want to see in the parliament. And then the question about the March 8th, and I mean, our ambassador, I think this is also properly said. I don't want to interfere in somebody else was drawn into a dirty debate. I mean, I myself found myself in a debate which I haven't expected, and obviously this is the way how you do politics, and this is the way how you treat people. I mean, I'm used to this, but I don't think it's a nice way how you, if you want to cooperate with international community, I think you rather step away from this dirty methods. I think this is in general, it's not a nice way. It's not integer. It's not, I mean, misusing people quotes and trying to pull people into it's their own business or your own business. For a general approach, I think this should stop. I cannot follow all the debates, all the domestic debates. I just got some of the quotes, and I think that was not appropriate, full stop. And everything else was mentioned by the ambassadors already. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Cristian, was your answers.
Thank you very much also for this opportunity to say a couple of words on the questions. And let me start with the one which, if I'm not mistaken, has not been touched, which is the relation between elections and the COVID crisis. And on that, by the way, let me mention first of all that the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe has started an initiative of holding bilateral video conferences with the national parliaments to discuss precisely the specific and concrete challenges of the crisis. One such debate will be held this upcoming Friday together with the Legal Affairs Committee of the Parliament of Georgia. And I think this is a very good initiative, and here I wanted to praise the Georgian authorities' overall management of the crisis, but in particular, they have already started to think about the concrete challenges that might show up during the October elections, should there be a second wave of infections. The Georgian sanitary authorities are very much into the topic, and I think are doing a very good job. And I think it all goes down to one particular aspect. I mean, I wouldn't worry that much unless there is an emergency in Georgia. I wouldn't worry that much about not being able to observe. I think to the extent possible, international observers will come to Georgia and they will follow the rules that apply to any other activities. I mean, they will keep the distance, use sanitizing measures and masks and so on and so forth. So the point here is to do your best within a given framework, and probably one thing to bear in mind and to make everyone aware of is to avoid any misuse or misinstrumentalization of the risks in order to, I don't know, either to prevent someone to vote or to intimidate voters or things like that. So acting in good faith here, and again, I think there is a need of making everyone aware and of involving all political competitors would bring us to the right solution in that regard. On the specific aspects to be improved in electoral terms, I wanted to add one to those mentioned already by the previous speakers, and that is the mechanism for dispute resolution. I think there is, and we believe there is, room to improve there, and the changes that are on the table of the parliament right now on the electoral code are a very good opportunity in that regard. On the March agreement, I think Kelly has said what had to be said. On one hand, we have the constitution adopted, which is very important. Equally important, and here I would say equally important, was the joint statement to avoid perception of misusing or politicizing judicial processes. And Kelly said, and I fully subscribe, this is a living commitment that could be probably assessed after the elections are held. But I would say even more, and I would encourage the Georgian political parties to try to live by this principle well beyond this year's elections, because it is important in the long run in a democracy, once you are in power or after you are in power and you go to opposition, to try to avoid to misuse whatever instrument is there, because instruments, legal instruments in a democracy can be misused and can be abused. So if everyone tries to live up by that commitment, our lives will be much better. And from that perspective, then this is something to be held accountable for in regard of all politicians. And I just wanted to add my voice to all the previous speakers and to express my solidarity, of course, with the German ambassador in Georgia. I think attacks against diplomats are really unacceptable and a very, very bad sign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking into the time, unfortunately, I have to finish this event, so I cannot take more questions, and we also have to finalize. I would really like to thank all the speakers, all the panelists for this very profound and rich contribution. I think it was already really quite strong analysis we saw here, and I think very important statements also which were made by you. I would like to thank the auditorium also for asking these questions, participating in the discussion. I think we need 1 more hour, yeah, to answer all the questions, but I think I think there were really major questions were taken. And I also would like to thank GIP for organizing this event, for putting it in from the analog into the digital sphere. Unfortunately, we cannot meet, but that's why maybe we have also more followers here and more participants in this event, which I think is also a big asset. So thank you very much all, and yeah, I'm looking for next year to meet you in person. Hopefully without this COVID-19 or in a different situation at least, even if this is maybe the new normal in which we have to live. So thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Or at the election observation mission, then hopefully at the end of October.
Yeah, and sure.
If Sassoli lets us travel, so we do hope. Thank you.
That is the next big step, to take the election.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.